Right. The whiteboard is right around the corner, right there.
Excellent.
All right. So,
yeah, let's do that. Let's do those. One of those focus. And hands up. And.
So my intention for these hackathons is that people get their hands dirty, that they actually get far enough into building something to be surprised at how easy it is to do. So my intention is not that everybody fully understands everything. So we kind of jump ahead and fill in bits and skip parts, and we also end up doing some of this kind of macro micro stuff where we look at things at a high level and kind of drill into some parts, but not necessarily all of the parts. And so for some that expect like a linear kind of methodical training, that's not what this is. This is a place to hack, to build, to learn a few things, hopefully to use some tools to kind of leapfrog ahead further than you should be able to with your current knowledge level, and then you go, wow, that was pretty easy. I want to go back in and fill the gaps. Does that make sense? So that's kind of how I like to set up the hackathons. And so we're going to end up using some sort of cheaty tools and stuff that help us leapfrog ahead, because that's more fun, I think. All right, so also just to introduce this, for those who aren't familiar with like a Kanban board, a Trello style board, this just sort of makes visible the things that we're doing and get literally what we're doing, what we've done, what's up next. Prioritize things that are up next, possible, or things we may talk about. We certainly will probably talk about these through the course of the weekend, maybe not tonight. If you have questions and you don't want to interrupt the flow, ask them or something like that, but you sort of want to sneak them in, write them on sticky notes. There's a bunch on the back table back there. Write them on sticky notes and get them up here, and we will get them into the flow. Do you want to talk about logistics?
Yep, let's do logistics. So for logistics, those are bathrooms. You'll see a sticky with a beautiful portrait of a turlet on it. It's been there for months now. No, I didn't. And that's that. Wi-Fi is Bushwick generator. The password is generator with a capital G. We're in Bushwick. It's a great juice and smoothie place around the corner back that way. If you have any questions, anyone, ask them.
Also, we had talked about Bushwick generator earlier in our thank yous, but there's Emmerich if you have questions and want to actually talk with somebody about what's going down here and what they're building around decentralization.
Really like two quick things?
Yep, sure.
Yes, just so you know, like some of you I know or I've seen before. So Bushwick generator is a community, it's a culture center, also a place for creators and innovators. This is just a sample space for development. So if you go behind these doors, it's a massive construction site in development, which is going to be like, hopefully like the tech hub of the future, but one where, we feel that the community has really a disproportionate share of how the space is used, how voting rights occur and so forth. So this is kind of it. Just want to let you know there's a lot going on behind those doors, so consider like the future if you want to, what this neighborhood looks like, and there's a place that's really accommodating to a community that's interested in their own betterment of the perfect place. That's it. And you can contact me with questions.
Thanks, Emmerich. All right.
And the password upstairs, sorry, is not different than the password downstairs. So just look on the router.
Yeah, the Wi-Fi password is on the sticker on the router upstairs. Concrete, steel floors and stuff, don't let much signal pass through.
All right, so another logistic is if you do social media stuff and you wanna take us.
Real simple, just feel free to share, but we're going to talk a little bit about like people whether they want their photos taken and posted or not. So please just make sure you have permission from anybody before you post their photo. Do we come up with a hashtag? Do you guys want to generate a hashtag? Anybody here actually want to post anything this weekend? It's cool if you do. How about, I don't know, Holochain NYC?
Yep. Hashtag Holochain NYC?
Yeah. Yeah, you're voting?
Great, thank you. So raise your hand if you are not comfortable with us using pictures or video of you. Okay. Great. Raise your hand if you're not comfortable raising your hand to say that you're not comfortable. If you're not comfortable and you're not comfortable saying it publicly, then you can come and see one of us. So say it. Raise your hand if you said you're not comfortable with videos and picture used. All right, so Ben can come and talk to you. Talk to both of them because some people are like, okay, if I'm part of a group, but not if I'm like the focal point or if I'm talking or whatever. So you can get what your individual needs are. Great, and then context.
So actually, I want to do history and context together. Do that. Lisa's not here. We had Lisa do history last time. She's very new to the organization, so it was very short. Nice. Doesn't have to share as much history. So we're going to try to follow that. Holochain actually does not come out of blockchain world. It comes out of sort of a different history with some similar motivations. Like it has sort of a grandparent project called the Metacurrency Project, which is really about going beyond the things we know today as currencies into more patterns, and there's a whole realm of stuff we can talk about there. Are we doing a currency design session Saturday night?
I'm not sure.
We may do a currency design session for people who want to like go deep into the weird concepts of currency design. When I use the word currency, you should know I don't mean the normal English phrase money. Like currency and money are used. Think currency, like the simple systems we create to manage flows together, if you will, right? And so we do that on lots of different levels, and there's a lot of our social intelligence hooked into this stuff. Metacurrency Project is all about that stuff. We prototyped a crazy technology platform to help us operate those kinds of currencies at all levels, basically to create kind of a quantum leap in our capacities for collective intelligence, for how to organize and coordinate together. It's called Scepter, C-E-P-T-R, short for receptor. And it's way too complicated for us to talk about today, and it's way too complicated for people to think about using. So we took one little piece of Scepter, the way that multi-instance receptors synchronize data with each other, and we built a standalone version of that called Holochain, literally to compete with blockchain, like to take this energy that is all coming up in the blockchain space and kind of the hopes and aspirations people have for it, and to actually create a platform that can fulfill on those hopes and aspirations, because we don't think that the blockchain pattern itself will. And it's not, this isn't to get an argument about blockchain versus holochain, although that is one of the possible topics. Not about an argument, but like what are the differences? It's just, we found in Scepter some very different scalable patterns for distributed systems, and saw them completely missing the target in this space, and just wanted to bring it in while there's like all that energy in this space. So that's kind of the context and history of where this came from, and it's really about ways for us to coordinate together. So one other little bit of difference is, in some ways, kind of, it seems that the ideology behind blockchain was a little bit more kind of crypto-anarchist, freedom from any outside constraints. Like we want to have this be digital anonymous cash that nobody can shut down or regulate or anything like that. We were coming at it from a different perspective, although I think we accomplished a similar goal, but we were coming at it from the perspective of trying to create capacities to constrain ourselves, basically to choose what contexts we want to operate in, completely decentralized with no central authority. And so there's differences that show up in the architecture. So it's kind of like the more you know about blockchain, the more you kind of have to reset some of your ideas here. And so I would just make an invitation to not assume that Holochain works like blockchain, and instead of thinking of it like blockchain, maybe think of it like Git, as in like each developer has their own repository that they keep code in, but instead of synchronizing with like a centralized GitHub or something, you have a BitTorrent-like space for sharing things in a DHT. That's closer to the architecture of Holochain. So don't think of it as a blockchain. It isn't one single ledger. It is a strange construct. It's not even a DAG like many of those other, like IOTA's Tangle or things like that. Do you want to talk about that?
No, you just did. That was good. Name it a little bit.
Go into that. I think we're going to have other questions.
All right.
That was context.
All right. So that's why Holochain, right? You know?
Sure.
I'm going to add a little bit.
Oh yeah, you want to get us?
Yeah, let's get what Art was just sharing about. This is tracking up. Totally, I'm with you. I'm with you. Got it. And this is down here is like, I'm just not getting it. What was that? Okay. All right, good. That's good. And then.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to say it again, just like real briefly, which is like why Holochain is it fulfills on a lot of the promise of blockchain in that it allows people to create applications where they own their own data and where they have a lot more privacy and a lot more sovereignty, and they can have interactions on fully scalable applications that are lightweight and easy to do, that a government or a centralized organization can't control, and from an architectural level that's from the ground up. We have another tracking if that made any difference. Great, a little bit. All right. And then the other thing for content.
Sorry, one more thing. But what I think he means by from the ground up, Holochain is completely peer-to-peer. There are no miners. There are no stakers. You know, it's lightweight enough that everybody can run full nodes of whatever application they want to run because it isn't heavy and ponderous like blockchain.
Oh, that's good. I wasn't clear enough. From the ground up, I also mean that it's actually built into the structure of how it works. Like at the basic level of the code, is it structured for functioning that way? Yeah.
So I'm not a developer or anything like that.
It's okay to hear.
So sorry for the bad question, but when you say a government or centralized entity can't control it, do you mean that there's no application for it in the government, or?
No, okay. There's plenty of applications in government. It just means, what I'm saying is you can have an application that people can run on their phones directly to each other, without having it go to any other party necessarily. That would structurally work, and you could do it on you could have a little Bluetooth network that we're all on in this room and run an application on that independently. And you can do the same thing through larger networks.
You guys touched on a little bit of the difference between Holochain and IPFS.
Not yet, right. But yes. So okay, and the other thing that I want to get into context is, outside of the context of Holochain in the world and what that is, we're going to get into the context for the evening and for the weekend, especially for the weekend, is like Art was saying with the macro and micro, this is a paradigmatic shift in thinking about data structures. So it's like whenever we have to reframe the way we think about how things work, it's a messy process of reorganizing how things can work or getting into a different form or a different structure, right? So if you're used to riding a motorcycle and then you start learning to ride a bicycle, they both have two wheels, they both go forward, you really sit on it in a similar way, but they ride very differently. And if you ride a bicycle and you go really fast and you think that you can take a turn, like you take a turn on a motorcycle like this, the bike's gonna fall out from under you and skid, you know what I mean? Like you have to turn the bike and like stay over it and maybe bend it beneath you. But on a motorcycle, the gyroscopic force works. Anyway, this is a bicycle riding thing, right? So it's gonna be messy and we're gonna have some, like if we're falling or things aren't clicking, That's part of the process. That's good. So messy is good. And then what we want to emphasize is you can learn, you can read a lot of books about riding bicycles, and you can go to lectures about them, and you can get a PhD in riding bicycles and do your postdoc in riding bicycles. But if you never actually get on a bicycle and try to ride it, you still won't be able to ride a bicycle. So we want to frame this as much as possible as a bicycle riding experience and get everyone into the experience of actually making stuff. And if you're not a coder, that's okay. You can actually still make stuff and follow the tools. And there's a lot of value in just trying, because trying helps the theory have a place in experience to land. So we really try to emphasize doing is better than the talk. And we'll have plenty of time to do the talk, but I want to bring this back there because we'll get through some key points, and then we're going to get to scaffolding where we can actually tonight start, building an app. Okay? Any questions on that? Yeah.
Can I jump back to Holochain just for a second? So I'm talking to because my team is building an app on Holochain, and I'm on the outreach side. I'm talking to a lot of people about Holochain, but because I'm not a tech person, I'm unable to give them an idea about how all these massive amounts of data is being stored on the peer-to-peer distributed. Like I imagine, oh my God, how is my cell phone going to hold, or how is the Holobox is going to hold these accumulations of data? So is there anything you could give me, like a place, something that where I could explain?
Are you here for this weekend? Just tonight?
But I'm really passionate about Holochain, and I would like to just regular people be able to understand.
Yep.
And
Okay.
And to me, that's
So when it's time for the scaffolding, when Art's doing the scaffolding with this group, I'll take a group of the people who need to explain it to regular people, and we'll do another breakout, and I'll go over it with you. Okay?
I'm the regular person, so if you want to explain it to me, that would be. You can test your.
Okay. Okay. All right. Great. That work? That work for everyone? Good solution. We'll do another fork. Okay. So, and then, Art, do you want to run through the layers, or? I mean, like, or is it actually set up that we could do that split, and you could start scaffolding with people?
No, I think we should. I think we should run through the layers,
Okay.
Because it'll help even for you.
Okay, let's do it.
So, woohoo! All right, moving sticky notes. Is it exciting? So, there's a bunch of assumptions that people may come in with about centralized systems or about blockchain, all that kind of stuff. And because this is different, I just want to do a really kind of high-level pass first and talk about some of the parts of the system, and then we can drill in a little further to try to help make sense of the chaos, or we will actually even build on some of the parts. But you make it sticky for the two fallacies. Just I want to do it right now, but I want to forget.
Okay.
So if you, for example, there's a couple people here, maybe they already went upstairs. No, there's John. Okay. So there's a couple people here that have been building on Ethereum. And so if you're familiar with Ethereum or other kinds of blockchains where you build dApps, every dApp runs on one blockchain. Every transaction, every financial transaction that occurs runs on that same one blockchain, right? Like everything happens on one blockchain. And therefore, if you have a dApp that starts taking off, say CryptoKitties or whatever, right? And then you also have an ICO that's happening and happens to have a lot of people have, like, it's actually like all one computer that everybody has to do the same computation again and again and again, like everybody. So it has some scaling challenges. So one of the are things that we have to reset as an assumption. And on Holochain, every application, every Holochain application is its own peer-to-peer encrypted network. It is not all one big monolithic blockchain. And the reason blockchain needs to do that, there's actually reasons that blockchain needs to do that, because you want a massive amount of participation, because their defense for their integrity model is nobody being able to take over more than a majority of the computation, 51% attack kind of thing, right? Holochain isn't structured that way. In fact, kind of what I would like to do is just as a little bit of a reset is, if you've got background in computing, like remember when he asked who was hardcore coders and all that kind of stuff, for the moment, forget about the way you've been taught to do computing and just try on how do we do things in the physical world. The physical world, turns out, it's really scalable, right? Like there's a lot of things to learn that work really well in the physical world. My body has trillions of cells in it, coordinating complex things on scale. And it doesn't happen by consensus. It doesn't happen by synchronizing against a single ledger, right? There are patterns that work on scale, and we don't normally use them in computing. So I want to try to do a little bit of a reset and just like start from a blank slate. And we're going to use some computing technology, terminology, which is going to sort of pull you back into the other ways of thinking. I just want to try to set that context. So this is kind of the network that an application, of all the users of an application talking to each other. This is one user of the application, one sitting here at this node, and the things that they've got going on their computer, right? So remember we said earlier when Bear mentioned from the ground up that this is a peer-to-peer architecture. Everybody has their own chain. In this case, you can think of it as a source chain, an authoring chain. It's their local state. It is not the state of anybody else's changes. It's the state of the changes that they've made. The things that they're responsible, the actions they've taken. Yeah.
Sorry. So no, I have a question. Let's say like I have one of these states, my phone or whatever.
Right? You have what?
Let's say I'm one of those people, right? I have my data.
So you are one of those people?
I am.
And you're running an app?
Yeah, I'm running an app, right?
Yeah.
And like my phone dies, and I go back up because no, I don't know, back up. And now Cybernet ceased to exist, so that's all my stuff. Great.
Write that down. We'll come back to that. We want to get an overview first. We got you covered.
Reach 2 minutes.
So if we're not done with this.
No.
So the local source chain, did you write that down?
Well, I mean, DHT's going to answer it
No.
now.
Because he's saying what happens if you lose your source chain?
No, he's saying what happens if I lose my phone.
Yes.
The answer is if you have it backed up to the DHT, then it doesn't matter.
Private entries don't go to the DHT. There's things, not everything is necessarily in the DHT.
Oh.
Just put documents down as a sentence. Sorry. Blockchain is a variant of this type of architecture, right? This is just a standard hash chain. And for those of you that don't know what a hash is and don't know what a hash chain is, don't know what a DHT is, that's okay. We actually can drill into those topics more individually. I just want to kind of go at a high level components before you have to understand all the components. But the difference between, in blockchains, what they do is instead of like one thing happening at a time, they throw a whole bunch of things into a block to try to make it easier to manage consensus about a bunch of stuff that happens, and different story. But this is an old architecture that predates blockchain by like 30 years or something. And part of the trick here, like part of the beauty of this structure is you have a very clear order of events, because new things get added to the chain, it just goes along. And the way the hashing works, which again, we'll come back to explaining more technically, but it turns it into basically an immutable structure. That if a hash on the top is shared in a shared space, you can't go back and change anything in the past without breaking that hash. So it kind of locks your past in. It makes you have an immutable past that you can't tamper with.
Raise your hand if you need the word hash defined.
All right, so where'd that part go? Where'd the tech tree go?
I'll get it with the hash.
All right, so I didn't mean to go to that level right now there, but hash is like a digital fingerprint. Technically, it's really a cryptographic fingerprint for data. If you take a piece of data, no matter how large or small, and you run it through a hashing algorithm, you'll come out with something that basically uniquely identifies that data, but it's of a fixed size, right? So it's like we have complex genetics and all that kind of stuff, but we seem to have unique fingerprints, and fingerprints are a nice small size. You can put them on a little black card, and the police can collect them and keep track of, right? So it's a way of kind of being able to identify people from a subset of data that also seems to be a unique identifier. So a hash is that, and we can talk more about what makes a good cryptographic hash, but the thing is it makes a little fingerprint for the data. The parts of a Holochain application are the application code, which is called DNA, the hash tree, which is where all of your state changes are. So but right now when you download Holochain, it comes with a peer-to-peer Twitter app. We're not trying to go and compete with Twitter and market that and that kind of thing. Mostly we're actually trying to show how easy it is that you can basically rebuild Twitter in like 200 lines of JavaScript. Yeah.
So when you say fingerprint for data, do you mean like fingerprint for each specific agent? So you can identify each agent?
For any particular piece of data. If you take a piece of data, run it through the hash algorithm, it comes out with an identifier. If you run that same data through again, you always get the same identifier. If you change one little thing, suppose you have a 700-page book, you change one comma to a period, then you get a completely different fingerprint.
Okay, so how small is that fingerprint?
In the case of our algorithm, we're using SHA-256, which means it's 256 bits.
Okay.
If you put that into character length, that's what, 32 bytes? That's so that means it'd be like 32 characters you can spell.
I can clarify my question. When you say like a piece of data for a social media application, for example, is that like a post? Could you say is like a piece of data?
A post?
Like something that's being
yeah, your username could be a piece of data.
A book, it could be something huge.
That's right. It could be a 20 gigabyte DVD.
Yeah.
Little Mermaid.
Thank you.
So the hash, the whole point is that it changes if you drastically for any small change, so it becomes a unique identifier. I just want to give an overview of the parts. So we have the application code, we have the hash chain, which is your local state. We have the DHT, which is a distributed hash table. So it again uses hashes, and it uses hashes. So first of all, let's talk about a hash table. So we are doing these things after all. We're doing a hash chain and hash table. All right, so your computer wants. Okay. So a hash table is basically, it's like a lookup table where you're going to organize data by its fingerprint. So if you have the if you have the fingerprint, if you have the hash, you can go find the data, right? So it's kind of like, FBI's fingerprint database where they want to go look up people based on fingerprints, right? They're storing information about people, but they're looking it up by the fingerprint. So in the case where you were asking about, is this a social media post or whatever? Yeah. So if you have the fingerprint, then you can pull back the whole post, blog post, social media post, the Little Mermaid DVD, whatever.
I want to bring us back into more technical to move towards the scaffolding.
Yes.
And then I can answer some of these in the breakout.
Yeah. Okay. Well, okay. Hang on. I'm going to get all the parts. So we were doing a hash table. A distributed hash table takes that lookup system and breaks it all across many different machines, where everybody doesn't need to hold all of the data. So if you're familiar with many of the file sharing systems out there, like BitTorrent or Nutella or eMule or like whatever all these things. Most of them use DHTs. Most of them use. Now they are using them slightly differently than we are, but nonetheless, what it does is it allows you to retrieve data by its hash across a whole network of nodes and know which nodes to go get it from. So that's all you need to know at the moment. This is also kind of the drawing of the network. This is how the peers are talking to each other. They're really talking to each other in DHT space. I think that's all we need to know at the moment. The other thing to know is that you can shard DHTs, right? Not everybody needs to hold everything. You just need to hold the parts that you're supposed to. So this is one of the advantages over blockchain is that people haven't really figured out effective sharding methods with blockchains yet.
I was just going to ask if there is a limitation of how many people can join DHT.
Well, I mean, technically it's 2 to the 256, right? Which, if you believe in a finite universe, is theoretically more than the number of atoms in the universe. I don't believe in a finite universe. I still keep using this example, but that's what they say anyway. So it's a huge, huge number. The DHT is the address space also for users to enter data. So that's how many elements it can hold, whether it's users or data. That's many atoms in the universe. Yeah. Yeah.
In the sharding example, how would that use people? So people have the hash and the information about where that piece of data was sharded.
Yeah. So different BitTorrent and different file sharing systems, they actually centralize things a little bit with a tracker. That's not what we do. We don't track who's holding what. What we do is we redistribute it based on the hash, based on the nearness of your address to the pieces of data that are being stored. And so you put in a redundancy factor in your app, you configure it, you want to say, my app is going to hold 20 copies of every social media post, 200 copies of every social media post. We want that many copies to be online. Then basically the 20 nodes or the 200 nodes that are closest to that piece of data are closest in the hash sense, meaning you can't predict who it's going to be. When you hash it, it's going to kind of randomize who holds it. It has nothing to do with physical network topology. So you should get a good random distribution in space, which gives you a lot of resilience for partitioning on the network. Yeah?
Is there an upper limit in terms of the storage of the DHT? Like, when it gets so huge that change that storage? Or?
So I want to be a little careful because you just said the DHT, and I want to, again, remember every application has its own, right? So there isn't one DHT. And the upper limit would be the disk space of all of the users, right? Like, so kind of the more users you add, the more space you have. Which is, again, it's kind of the opposite problem of many blockchain and even many of sort of the next gen blockchain things like Hashgraph and stuff like that. The more users you add, actually it starts to slow down the system. And in this case, it actually makes the shards smaller, makes the workload per user smaller. Yeah.
So does that make it more environmental than
Way more. So for those of you who don't know, proof of work in particular is extremely energy inefficient. It's consumptive. And so like Bitcoin at the moment is using about 0.5% of the whole planet's electricity to do 5 transactions a second.
1/200. Just sounds more.
1/200th of all of the planet's electricity to do 5 transactions a second. We have done some scalability testing and run up to 100 nodes on a single Raspberry Pi with 2 gig of RAM. So that's a 15-watt device. And anyway, we're talking about completely different orders of magnitude: energy use, scalability, resource use, storage requirements, etc.
What he's not emphasizing, raise your hand if you get how big of a deal that is. Okay, so for those of you who don't have your hands raised, this is a huge deal in terms of making the promise of decentralized apps feasible from like an actual infrastructure and electricity perspective. Currently, blockchain is using 1/200th of all of the Bitcoin. Just Bitcoin is using 1/200th of the world's electricity, right? And we're talking about an astronomical increase in efficiency, and it's that use of electricity that's what makes running apps on blockchain really expensive and really consumptive to the planet's life. And this is saying we can use the current infrastructure that we do have and have way bigger efficiency by running this as a different system on it. Does that make more sense?
Yes.
Cool. Nick?
So it sounds like every time you have a data or one computer, right, you said you make copies of it, and each copy is kind of there to be as a check and balance to make sure everything is sync, right? How do you decide how many copies to make?
You just
that determines how much storage.
Can I try?
Yes.
So you decide the copies based on your needs for that app or for that use case. One app can have multiple use cases. If I'm high-fiving someone, I might want one person to remember that for me, right? Because if they forget, big deal.
I'll be the only other person in the network that has a copy.
If I'm buying a car, I want several thousand people to make sure that that's valid, right? Or maybe tens of thousands of people. That's fine. The current pattern is that if I send someone like less than a penny, everyone has to say, oh, like I said, he said less than a penny. Let's all make sure that we register that and then also do a whole bunch of busy work outside of that. Yeah, so it's just like woefully inefficient.
Where every penny is to be able to spend this one.
Yeah, it's just like,
yeah.
So.
So, I just moved Sticky's hand. So the 4 parts, just to be clear, wait 1 second. The 4 parts of the architecture of an app are the app code itself, the DHT as the shared storage space where you can do global lookup of things, your local chain, and something that isn't on this map, which is the UI, the user interface, which we basically enable web frameworks of whatever it's, you have access to a WebSocket. Anything you want to put on that front end, whether you want to use React or Vue or vanilla JavaScript or whatever way you want to render the UI, that's actually loosely coupled. Part of why it's not on this map is basically you host yourself, you run a little server, and you point it at yourself. When you open the browser, you literally, when we do this later, you'll see you type in localhost and a port number, and you're serving yourself the application. And when it needs to get data from somebody else behind the scenes, it goes and talks to people to get data, but you're actually running the service to yourself, serving yourself basically a web page, right? Sorry, one other thing that you mentioned about the different DNAs, I just want to underscore this one point, is that DNA is the genesis block of every chain, right? So you know what set of rules, what application are being used here. So every person's source chain starts off by saying, this is the rules I'm playing by. So who's ever played cards with friends, right? And sometimes if you played where you can change up the game while you're playing, maybe playing poker, and it's like, well, now I'm dealing, so I get to choose wilds, and and I'm gonna choose, 2s, 3s, and 4s. And you guys are all like, wow, 3 wilds, that's lame, So we negotiate the rules, but in any case, we know what rules we're playing by. And then who's ever hired a referee when you've played cards with friends? Anyone? Bueller? You don't do that because you can mutually police each other, right? When someone starts to go out of turn, you go, whoa, wait, that's Tom's turn, right? You can mutually police each other. And so the whole point here is when you all have the same rules that you're playing by, then everybody can make sure that everyone else is playing by the rules. You don't need any central authority. And you started your chain by saying this is the set of rules. If it was off by one space, it's not going to come out to the same hash, which means as part of the network encryption salt, which doesn't mean anything to half of you, but it means you're not going to be talking to each other. You're only talking to peers on the network that are running the same rules. Yeah.
So wait a second. Tracking check on where we're at right now? Great.
Cool. Yeah.
So in theory, you could create like document type A, document type B. You can say document type A can never be changed once it's incorporated in the story, and document type B can be edited at any time inside of the person.
Yes-ish, but let's clarify what that really means in Holochain. So yes, in one set of rules, you could say, we're playing Twitter where you can edit your tweets. And another set of rules is saying, we're playing Twitter where once you've said it, it can't be unsaid, right? Like, and what edit means in Holochain, because of the hashing system here, your previous tweet is in here. You're just writing a new tweet and saying, this one replaces the old. And out of the DHT, they're still both out there. But the old one gets marked as deprecated and points to the new one, right? So things don't actually get deleted. In the case that was an update, things don't actually get deleted, they get marked deleted. And the reason for that has to do with a bunch of things, but it basically has to do with gossip. It has to do with the fact that you never know in a distributed system what order people are going to receive information, right? And so if you have this thing where I'm creating a tweet, and you have this thing where I'm deleting a tweet, and then somebody receives it in the wrong order, where they get the delete command first, but then they get the add command, then they're left holding the tweet, gossiping with others, saying, why aren't you holding this tweet? You know, and so it's necessary to keep from getting in these horrible gossip loops where you keep creating and uncreating things. You just have to mark the old ones deleted. Once they're marked deleted, they can never be marked undeleted. You have to create it again from fresh.
So I want to be clear about the gossip piece. That's something that happens automatically. That's something inside that's happening. The architecture is doing that. The user doesn't have to think to do that. They're not like actually going to the other person and asking. The system's doing that for them. Joe.
The DNA, is that solely decided by the user, the creator of the app, or does it contain some rules, some base rules that are decided by the protocol?
So the DNA is an app. All of it runs on top of Holochain as an underlying service or library or data store. You can think of Holochain itself as a kind of peer-to-peer database that uses cryptography to make sure data can never be tampered with, and that it's always changed only according to the rules of the app. That's Holochain's job, right? So, sorry, a couple of other things that just worth mentioning. Holochain has no token. For those of you that think that these systems all must have a token, Holochain doesn't have one. The reason for that, for us, is very simple and clear. It's like the reason that you don't want the internet protocol to have a currency built into it. You want to be able to run any currency on top of it. Holochain needs to be a neutral engine. So you can build apps such as currencies on top of it. So for those of you that know that we've also done an ICO, we didn't do that for Holochain. Holochain is just an open source, neutral project. There's another project. We got Holo versus Holochain. There's another project called Holo, and we apologize in advance for the brand confusion. We wanted people to understand they were related. Holo did do an ICO. Holo runs on top of Holochain. We sold a bunch of hosting boxes because Holo's, I'm going to get to the little picture of the hosting box. It's here's a nice little. Holo's mission is actually basically to be the Airbnb of the cloud hosting space. So in the same way that Airbnb sells more hotel nights than the largest chains but has never built a hotel, we think that we can actually take on the Amazons, Googles, and Microsoft, Azure, the big hosting companies without ever building a data center by using Holochain to tap into existing computing power everywhere. And then you can actually operate things at scale, even like Facebook scale.
Again, I want to emphasize in a more emotionally charged voice how deeply radical that is. So that's it.
So the decentralized system can run on computers. Like peer-to-peer, like making communication ways to.
Right. So exactly, it pushes scalability instead of it being about virtualizing a computer in a data center across a bunch of computers or clustering nodes or something like that. It actually pushes it out to a peer-to-peer architecture. And the reason Holo has a currency is Holochain, as we mentioned from the beginning, is completely peer-to-peer. It assumes you are hosting yourself. If you want to take Holochain apps mainstream, suppose you build, an Airbnb alternative, Airbnb kind of thing, and you want grandma to look up vacation homes on your app, she's probably not installing some hot new next-gen crypto tool, like Holochain. She's just wanting to type in a website to her browser. Well, what Holo does is it allows you to basically bridge to web users by having other Holochain nodes provide virtual Holochain space for grandma. Right?
Tracking from that?
And they get paid for doing that. Just like Airbnb would normally pay for hosting, they might pay Amazon or whatever. Now they're paying normal peers for extending that hosting service.
And then we've got, what if I lose my phone? And Holochain versus IP accounts.
What's our timeline right now?
It's like, I want to be building at 7:30.
7:30. We're an hour in.
I think let's do building and then get to those.
Yeah.
Does that work? Great. We made some sense of chaos or chows.
Is that okay? So let's start to build a few things. I want to. Yeah, we're just going to do it. Who has a fairly simple app idea for decentralized app? Yeah.
Password manager.
Pardon? Password manager. Okay. Pardon? Instagram Club. Okay. Decentralized chat.
Virtual building.
Virtual what room?
Like, I sign my documents and I'm like,
Okay, so like signing, notarizing of contracts or deals type of thing? Okay. Yeah?
Local journalism.
Speak up.
Political journalism, you said? Or what was the first word you said?
Journalism. Local.
Local journalism. Okay. Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. File sharing. Okay.
Like a game, like Super Mario.
Okay. Cool. So let me just give a little bit of feedback about the kinds of things that came out, so you have a sense, because we want you to get to building things. Yeah. So we have a little thing here of like, what kind of things should you take on building over the course of one weekend, right? For a game, it almost is all user and graphics, and it has very little to do with kind of, right. But still, like, what you're trying to build is usually, yeah, you need to get to that other underlying part. Plus, even though Holochain is fast and efficient, it isn't really quite real time. Now, we've had some people build real-time-ish games on it, and they actually have reasonably good gameplay. So who remembers Minesweeper from, like, clicking to clear the mines? And so we made a miner sweeper game, and they have the different icons of different mining coins that are on there. And if you click on one, you blow up, but you only get negative points because it's actually a multiplayer game, and you you have this big board and you're playing against other people and you're seeing them clearing the field and marking things and all that kind of stuff. And you get a real-time-ish experience. There are a few places where you get disappointed where it's like you marked a mine and then you see the marker change to somebody else's little marker icon because they actually had beat you to it. You didn't know that? Sorry. So the idea for the weekend is, kids, keep it simple, smarty pants. So like Instagram.
The miner sweeper was not made in a weekend. It was made by a team of people who had been in the internship and like spent a lot of time learning Holochain and over a course of time. So like weekend's a short period of time.
Yeah. Like Instagram, parts of it are easy, parts of it, like the file storage part, like file sharing, unless you're gonna go off of something else, it actually isn't as easy. Because you have to figure out, are you going to dump your files on random people? Are you going to break them into parts? It just ends up being an extra thing to manage. You can do it. It just has some layers of complexity that's probably not app number one to start with. So then we had deal market. Some of the interesting things there is everything is signed, cryptographically signed. You get for free a whole bunch of signing capacities, and because we recommend that you implement currencies not as tokens, like happens on blockchain, but as accounting, we have people countersign transactions. So one of the things built into Holochain is mutual signing and countersigning, right? So, does that matter? Okay. So, yeah.
So, when you create something, and and you want to distribute it to others, for that person to get access to it, they have to consent first.
They have to consent?
Yeah, like to receive the information. You said it gets spread out, like if they copies or something.
No, they don't. They store the data that is in their shard to store, that's near their hash. So there's no.
Does that have access to the compute network? And if we wanted to make copies of 20 people,
so the copies,
and if we send to every single one in the neighborhood, that's one command.
Yeah, so it doesn't work the way that you're describing. It's not a command. It's actually, I mean, it is in the underlying code, but it's actually coded into your configuration what level of redundancy you're operating. So if you say, so you set it up in the DHT that you are storing 20 copies, right? Sorry, in the DHT configuration that you're storing 20 copies. You don't set a command that says publish 20 copies, right? You're only doing that because everybody's agreed to play by the rules that we're going to store 20 copies. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, so he wants to use Antsy to get to building. We had some good examples for building.
So when you say that 20 copies are stored near the hash, again, it's not a physical location, near.
Right.
Near meaning the hashes are similar to each other.
Exactly.
Okay.
Meaning they have the largest.
Most amount of characters alike.
The prefix in common
Okay.
essentially is.
Yeah, you got it. You got it. It's not actually nearness.
Got it.
Yeah.
So sometimes these are understood correctly, but if you're not using the hosting service to access an application with on Holochain, you're actually going to download it to your device.
Correct. Everybody must run a peer to run a Holochain app. Holochain apps are peer-to-peer. They're super lightweight. They can be a small Qt application. They run on cell phones and tablets in the new Rust version. So today we're going to be building some stuff on the old version in Go. We've rebuilt Holochain in Rust specifically to optimize it for mobile and tablets and browsers to actually run full Holochain nodes in browsers even. And
that's the face. That's also one of those big things. It's a big deal.
well, the big, yeah.
All right. So enough to get moving into the do. Are you coming this weekend?
No.
That sucks for you, man. That sucks for you.
So let's do one really quick. So we had a chat and we had what's that?
File sharing.
File sharing. Somebody also did. Yeah. Voting. Voting's an interesting one because it's a good one to learn how to deal with eventual consistency. So this is an eventually consistent data store. And so just one brief tangential story. We had a developer who was way into governance and voting and all that kind of stuff. And he came in and he kept like banging his head against the wall, like going, you can't do these things because you don't know whether you've collected all the votes and all that kind of thing. It's like, well, again, that you're assuming from a centralized data store how you would do things. How do we do things in the real world? To know if we've collected all the votes. Pardon? You have deadlines. You have a fixed known number of locations. You don't know how many voters are going to come, but you know how many places you're collecting votes from, right? And if you haven't collected all the votes from so if you want to cast a vote, then you have to have a roll that's like a ballot box to countersign. If you know that there's 50 or there's 500 or there's 5,000 ballot boxes, and if it hasn't been countersigned by a ballot box, then your vote hasn't been cast yet, right? And then you know you have to collect all 50 or 500 ballot boxes to have gotten all the votes, right? You can do these kinds of things, and they're actually not that hard. You just have to think about the problem a little differently. You can't just say, well, I'm going to count the votes in the DHT, because the DHT is changing all the time. A moment later, there may be different votes, right? So you need to have a deadline, and you need to know from whom to have collected them all, which point is complete, right? Yeah.
I have a little bit of tough time trying to map out how the architecture works.
So yeah, the thing
let's start
we're on a sticky. The thing is, there's so much depth to all of this that we can sit around and describe all of the depth, but there's all of this documentation on the internet that you can learn about that depth on, and a whole bunch of other people who can explain it to you. But we want to just start getting our hands dirty tonight, and then hopefully that'll be rich enough. Sorry if I'm like too pushy about that, but here. Oh, and if you write questions on stickies, please put your name on them so that we know when we're answering them that we're answering them to you. Because some of them might be things that over the course of the weekend that someone can actually just come up to you and address directly, and some of them are stuff that the whole group is going to want to hear. And that's okay. So that's actually, I'm going to go back into the context for the weekend. That goes back to the weekend context. Is this is like a standard pattern that we relate to teaching and learning and education, is that there's one person that has all the information, that everyone is going to receive it from that one person who's at the front of the room, with everyone facing that person just like this. And we really want to think about using a more diffused pattern or a more distributed pattern for actually learning this. There's a whole lot of people here who have been to other events and who know a lot of these concepts and who can explain them effectively and more individually related to the needs of a different person who's asking that question. So I get like antsy while we're in this mode of learning, because I know that the other pattern for learning is more powerful and more effectively uses the actual resources that we have distributed within this space that we're operating currently.
So we're going to build a Holochain app real quick.
And if you're not interested in building a Holochain app, we can go and do you still want to have the conversation? Those of you, yeah? Like,
no, wait. Just let's just see how quick it is real fast here. Just hold on. So let's just, for speed, let's go with the chat application. Like, everybody's familiar with it, we know how to do it. We want to pick something that everybody understands.
Right, humility check.
Okay, yeah. So one quick thing. I would kind of say this before you go off to build your own apps, but you may not consider yourself a coder or an app designer. You may think that you're going to ask a stupid question or you're not going to track what's going on. Let me just say that nobody is fully tracking what's going on. And even me as the architect of the stuff behind this, I'm still only scratching the surface of what are the patterns that really make this stuff work and shine and all that kind of stuff. There are no masters in this space. So don't worry if you're not one. Because there aren't any. So, good enough?
Mm-hmm.
All right, cool. So, who's used Slack? Do we have essentially 100% coverage in the room on that? Really? In the back there? Yep. You just didn't raise your hand, right? I know you use Slack. Okay. Okay. What's that?
I'm just curious, this is Keybase.
To chat, you mean? Keybase chat?
Yeah.
No one here uses Keybase. So let's call it, you know, Holochain actually exists. And it's already Slack clone.
Halloween.
Bushwick. Because Bushwick. Because we're in Bushwick. Slackland. Like Brooklyn, but it's Slackland.
I think we're going to find. I call it Chatterface at the moment. Can you guys see this back there? Problem is, it's going to keep popping up. So you guys read that okay back there? I think. Pardon? So this is going to be multi-channel chat space. And so you guys don't know what a zone is, but you know what DNA is. And parts of DNA that we recognize as parts that seem to recur in different patterns we call chromosomes. Devs don't like to type words that are so long, so we just call them zones. So think of this as a module. There's no right way to know how many zones to make for your app, just like there's no right way to know how many modules to make. But the idea is that you get reusable componentry that you may want to put in different parts. Chats are a really good example of reusable componentry, right? Like you may want to put discussion thread at the bottom of your web page. You may want to put so you may want to have just like a simple post and reply, type of data structure that could be reused in lots of different contexts. That's why you might want to make a zone that contains that only. Does that make sense? So we're going to add a zone, and so I think, here we go, and we're going to call this channels, and it is chat rooms where the chatter is. And channels are going to have certain types of zone entries. Zone entries are your data structures. You can think of this as if you were creating a table, that you're like a database table, you define what fields are in your database table. This is a little bit more like MongoDB if you've used something that's like an object store or a document store, where what you're defining right now is a document format that's going to go into the store. So let's call one a post, and this is unfortunately what happens. It's going to keep popping out like that. We're going to leave it type JSON and public, and we will let people update and delete them. And here's where strange magic happens sometimes. So we use JSON schema. Is anybody familiar with JSON schema? So is anybody familiar with JSON? Yeah. JSON schema is a way of defining data structures using JSON outline. So let's use an example of what a post data structure might look like. So we're going to have content, which is going to be hello world, and and we're going to have maybe a in reply to some hash ID. This is a hash ID. And what else do we need to have? So you might think you want to have a timestamp. You might think you want to have an author. You get all those things for free. In the chain structure, everything ends up getting signed and timestamped, so you know who made it and you know when, according to their local time, and then you know when, according to network time, that different people received it and signed it. So there's plenty of timestamps. You usually don't have to put them in your data. The only reason you would is if you are trying to make data that happens at different times unique, so you don't have collisions on hashes. So something you might put here, though, is the channel that the chat was happening in, right? So channel in a room. Although really, we don't even need that. Channel is welcome. And then let's do a timestamp to create uniqueness. I don't know how. Who knows how? Sorry, probably I might have somebody else do this and type. Lisa, do you want to type?
She can do it.
I know she can. Do you want to type so I can? We're just looking for a timestamp. Oh no, it's gone. Damn it. Clicked out. So this little screen here is a cheaty tool, another cheaty tool. Remember I mentioned we were going to use some cheaty tools to jump ahead. So I was making a sample entry. It just had a post and it had a in reply to, and it has a timestamp and a channel that happened in.
So if I create an app and somewhere along the way I realize that I need to add the data field or modify the data field, I need to basically redeploy the app and go on, but I can't. There's a high probability that I'm going to be able to get all the data, or maybe not.
Yeah, it's a great question. The big advantage of centralized systems is you only have to update in one place, and everybody comes to you and is using the new updated thing. So a challenge for distributed systems is updating apps. Because it's just like, it's just like phone apps and stuff. You got to get people to download the new version of the phone, or the app. So we have an approach for that helps make that easier for you, where there's a little bit of governance built in to the app where you can officially post an update. Now, that doesn't mean everybody has to follow your update, but so
Yeah.
Like, and then a channel ID that it happened with. This is a cheaty tool where we're going to actually just construct some JSON here, and then it builds the JSON schema for us. So you don't have to learn JSON schemas. Pardon? Just wait. We'll fix that later. including the things on the left side of the course.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Then in just a moment, this infer schema is going to turn green. Bing! And so now we can, you should still put the channel for now. And some channel ID. Cool. So hit infer schema, and then remove the formatting, and copy it. Oops, just at the top, there's a copy, upper right. Oh,
sorry.
Yes. Go back one tab and paste all that stuff in. Okay, so sort of, for those that didn't track, it's not necessarily that important, but what we did is we built a sample entry. We used that little cheat tool there to have it generate the schema for us. We pasted the schema back in here as the tool for validating all chats that are going into the chat. That makes at least basic sense. Okay, cool. So then we probably want to have channels as another zone entry. Type fast.
Whoa.
That's why you have to type fast. Sorry. Cool. And then we probably want to update and delete channels as well. And let's come back to that. The part that was a little slow and boring, let's come back to that. Let's move ahead. Okay. For zone function, we probably want to have list channels. List channels. And let's make that a public call. And another one would be render chats. Render inside is basically the way you've opened the channel and now you're going to render maybe recent chats. Because you don't want to necessarily do it from the beginning of time.
Okay.
Make it public also. And okay, so I want to make sure that what we're doing here is clear. So these are some data structures, posts and channels. That covers most of the data that gets created in a chat space. There's also probably user profiles, but and then everybody familiar with CRUD operations, like the create, read, update, delete, the operations that you can do to a chat or a channel, that kind of thing. This thing that we keep closing because we've expanded the screen really large and the resolution on the projector is kind of poor. This thing that keeps popping out is actually generating the code for us. It's actually generating the CRUD functions and all that kind of stuff, so you don't have to. And so let's add a link here.
Can I do a tracking check?
What's the actual question about their tracking?
Are you tracking this presentation? This is like, I'm following this, I'm getting it, I'm ready to start doing it, and this is,
I'm not ready to start doing it. That's too far.
All right, awesome. Can I get a check on that? The whole room?
Different places. All right, fair enough. So we're going to add one more entry here to this zone. It's going to be a link, and we're going to make it a channel directory. It's going to be, we're going to link all the channels to a place that you're going to be able to find them. Okay. All right, let's do the schema real quick for the channel. Sorry, it's going to take just a second, but we want to actually generate the right code. So let's have a channel. Channel has a name. Is there anything else the channel needs to have?
An emoji.
An emoji, an icon?
Yeah.
Okay, what were you saying? Number of participants? You don't want to predefine the number of participants, right? The number of participants, where how many people join the channel. Let's pardon? The description. Yes, that'd be a good one.
Okay.
You can't hit tab when you're in there.
I know.
It'll format itself when you're done. You don't need to format it.
Is it description?
Yep.
Okay. Okay.
Description.
Public or private?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we can do that. So let's just do it one more thing.
That's fine. I'm waiting.
Okay, let's infer the schema and copy of that.
Alright.
So Eric would like to give people a chance who don't want to go more deeper into the technology, a chance to split out. I would actually like for us to download this thing first, for you to actually see actually how quickly you can jump to something. So
It's almost done.
yeah, so let's download it. From, well, actually, let's pop out the side menu for a moment and just let people see. So it generated a whole bunch of stuff, which has different, like there's a UUID. So by the way, a universally unique identifier. So if you wrote a Slack app and you want to spawn a new Slack team, you just change the UUID. Now you have a different private encrypted network. You have a new Slack team. You don't have to change any code. Just changing the UUID makes a non-functional difference, but it changes the DNA hash, so now you're in your own private space. Does that make sense? So there's a bunch of things like that in here, like what the default language is, so you can support multilingual interfaces or different stuff like that. Don't want to go into too much detail about all these things, but the thing that matters is down here, we start getting into zones. We only have one zone. We have the types of data entries. They have their data schemas in here, and then we have zone functions and what level of exposure they have and that type of stuff. So we generated all this stuff basically for you from that little GUI. Now we're going to download it and run it. Oh shit, this is perfect. You don't even have Holochain on your computer, do you?
I think I do.
Oh, okay. Normally it's my computer working. So she just downloaded a zip file, and it's just going to unzip it into download filter is fine. Did you download the zip file or the YAML file?
I thought she just unzipped it by clicking the zip on the.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
all right. Gotcha. Sorry, I wasn't watching the screen.
It's fine.
Okay, so let's also show really briefly. Let's click over here. So for those of you who want to do this yourself, you can just Google GitHub Holochain, and you'll get to this page as the first match. This was the Go version, the prototype version of Holochain that we've rebuilt now in Rust, but still this is the one that has releases out. You want to go to this little tab in the center that says Releases, and then download a release for your operating system, Mac, Linux, Windows, and then unzip that and you've got it.
And there's a reading in there, and I'll walk you through the instructions. They're pretty clear.
So, does he have a NIS path? Do you want to open a terminal and see? Sorry, you're on the spot here. You're not a Mac user.
I'm not a Mac user.
Yes, please. I'm not a Mac user either, but that's how I cheat. So type HCD and see if it's in his path.
Yep.
Okay, so he does have Holochain installed. So we're gonna just jump ahead to, if you change the downloads directory and then to Chatterface, capital D downloads, capital D, and then Chatterface, see if it's in there, just hit tab, yes. All right, cool. So we're in the Chatterface directory, we're gonna run the tests. We do test-driven development. For those of you that are not familiar with it, we encourage the pattern of building tests to make sure your code is working. In case you accidentally break the code later, you can always run the tests, see what you broke. So let's do hcdev test. Dev is, by the way, to run Holochain HC in developer mode. We're running it right now as a developer to run our tests. And if you scroll up, actually make this window full. See all these red broken tests? Yes, we have tests failing. So the game in test-driven development is red, green, repeat. Basically, you write a test that's broken and red, it doesn't work. Then you write the code that turns it green. Now your test passes. Now you repeat. You write a new test that's broken, it doesn't work. And you write the code that makes it work. Right? So we have lots of broken tests here. Now the thing is, we know how to fix them instantly. It's a little bit cheaty. So he probably doesn't have a JavaScript editor on his computer.
Do you have any?
I have Sublime.
Sublime.
I have both. Yeah, I have Holochain downloaded and natively installed.
Perfect. So
Where's
I'm going to applications. I think it's your app.
Sorry.
Who knows how to get
Command space.
Command space type Sublime. Perfect. Yes. Okay, let's open up that file. You can just probably drag it into Sublime from the Finder too. So we're going to go into the DNA folder. Let me just pause for a second. So there's 3 folders.
Sorry.
Pause for a second. There's 3 folders here. DNA, which is where the app code actually lives. Test, which is, guess what lives there? The tests. UI, where the UI lives. And then once you're actually running it, there's one more folder called DB, and there will be 2 database files in there. One is your chain, one is the DHT or shard of the DHT, right? So we're not running it yet, so the database file doesn't exist. Let's go into the DNA directory and into the Chatterface zone and run. No, sorry, the channel zone, right? And open the JavaScript file. And drag that into Sublime. Cool. And let's make that full screen so it will. Okay, cool. So here, we're just going to do a find all. We're going to do a find replace, actually. Does anybody know the key shortcut for replace?
Is it not Command R?
So,
Command
here, find. Say it's true and false. So what we're going to do right now, this is a horrible thing to do in your code normally. What we're going to do is we're going to replace every false with true. Because right now, these are validation functions that we have this nice little helpful hint here that says, do not just flip this to true without considering what you're doing, right? So Holochain is a peer-to-peer application where, remember we said that validation happens by mutual reinforcement. What we just basically did is we started off by saying, nothing is valid. You have to write and say what is valid. Now we just made any action valid, right? So it's like, I can edit your tweet or your chats. I can delete your channel, right? We just made any action valid. Not super secure, but the test will pass. So, let's make that full screen too. That where we were? No, this isn't the right directory. This is
Here we are.
Yes, this is the test. This is where we're. So now we're going to run HCDev test again, and look at this. Green. All the reds are green. So all the tests passed. Now can you run HCDev web? So now as a developer, we're going to start a web server. So remember how I said you always host yourself, right? So she just ran HCDev web, and now she's going to go to localhost 411.4141 and click on the top. Yeah. So we've got a little bit of a UI that we also have rendered for you. So not only from the scaffolding, not only did we build out the functions, we built a bunch of tests, which all you have to do is allow validation to happen so that it would work. And then now we have, this is like a little bit of a developer UI. This is not a user UI, really, but it lets you actually have access to all of your functions through the web UI so that you can practice passing things in, see what happens, break them, test them. You can steal code from this to put into your UI. Right? Pardon? Can't.
GraphQL. You guys have GraphQL?
We do not. Nope. So anyway, we basically have something up and running with these tests. Now, the one thing that's not happening is the functions that we wrote for list channels and recent chats in a channel. Those functions don't actually do something yet, right? So we have all the CRUD functions. We can create chats and channels. We don't have something that lists them collectively. So we put in placeholder code for that, meaning we just put in the function name. If you go back to Sublime, so let's find the type, search for list. On the bottom, yeah. So here's list channels, right? We have a completely useless function that says your custom code here, right? So these are empty. We actually need to go and do these actions right now. Basically, that's what's missing for this to have the parts working together. We could start to do that. I'm worried that that goes into too much detail. Like this would be a time for you to pull a group that doesn't want to go into the next level of coding.
Who would like to talk about Holochain and Holo and learn how to talk about Holochain and Holo? Okay, let's go upstairs.
You can jump back and forth. Send an envoy to the other group.
Yeah, this has been recorded more, I think already, but I'm looking for recording. So,
It's kind of hard to see on the screen, but I could just keep this going and come back.
Okay, so coder people, I'm a little closer because I know we are supposed to in the back.
Oh, I'm interested. Hang on a second. The bigger split than I expected. Okay.
Oh, so you want to take it downstairs?
Yeah, bigger.
Yeah. Okay.
But you can't, you need the projector to screw it. You're wrong.
Yeah, projector. There, why don't you stay here, we'll take some.
All right, so we're going to stay down here. Stay standing up to do this.
Oh, I guess it's the only one that's on. Yeah. All right.
So just for the live stream, you guys are finishing this upstairs.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess that would be the end of the live stream.
Okay. You want to say goodbye to the world?
All right, yeah.
Goodbye, world. Thanks for joining. Sorry for the sudden closure of this. So we're going to follow the energy of the space and bring a smaller group to move forward. Yeah.
Sorry, thank you. Hi, Internet. It's great to see you again. Hope you had a great day. Thanks for coming.
We could keep live streaming this, talking about how to talk about Holo stuff. I can always cut it all together.
Will you stick around, Lisa? Yeah. Lisa, will you stay with me and help me with this one?
Sure.
Great.
Yeah.
All right, let's cozy up. Can we thanks, Johnny. And can you use or Manny, I'm sorry, Manny, can you use your just bright energy to make other people also move to the front so that I don't have to take that? You have bright energy too. But I'm recognizing that you do and I'm requesting. Can you do it? And because I know you can. Would you grab me a
Yeah, it's in the sink in the back. There might be in the
Cheers. That's following the scaffolding, the building the app. This is the talking about Holochain. What we'll do is, all right, so we just forked everyone. Friendly fork. Have fun. It's friendly.
No, I'm not gonna lie. When I saw that board, I got excited to repeat us.
There's bread back there. Just some simple bread. I usually provide more stuff, but I didn't today. So sorry. There's food tomorrow though.
I can't be you.
Yeah, I'm just gonna rub it in, dude. Sorry. So let's what we'll do is we'll go through and we'll get questions. Thank you for coming up. It's much nicer this way. So we'll get questions, and we'll just take all of our questions and put them up here, and then we'll go through them and see which ones we want to answer and in what order, so that there's some cohesion to how we go through it. So start. Yeah.
Quick question. Would it be smart if I don't have a coding experience to be there if I want to be here tomorrow?
Not necessarily. It could. We'll probably end up running through that again. And to where they're going now, this next level, maybe not. I mean, ideally, you'll actually connect with other people into a group, and you'll be part of a little team. You should do a little time check. Time check.
812.
812. Okay, hey, Amanda, can you tell them, both groups, that we've got another 30 minutes and then regather, please? Okay. Thank you. Can you time keep for me, please? 30-minute time?
30 minutes, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so the question is not code or can stay? Right? I made it a different, can.
You already answered.
Can, good? Okay, I know, but I want to just mark that I can. Everyone got that? So like that, I mean, you can still stay, you can still be part of a group, and if you have an idea, you want to work on it, yes. Any other questions?
I want to understand where does Holochain sit in terms of the technology stack for a mobile app. In the conventional sense, like there's a microservices, there's only the API.
Okay, great. Okay. More questions? Mary?
2 questions. One is for blockchain, there's an option to have permission for blockchain, right? But is there a permission to type a closed way of doing Holochain? It's one.
You mean privacy?
No, one organization controlling who gets on and who gets to be a part of the network.
What's the, okay, how would you name that question?
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Can centralize?
Yeah, but she's talking a little bit more like access and permissions. So, yeah.
And
okay.
The second question, I guess, relates to identity. Like, how do you, so for certain services, if you want to apply this to government services or whatever, you have to be able to authenticate who that person is, right? Validate that this is really who they say they are. How does that happen on Holochain?
Verification.
Okay.
Cool. Those are great questions.
On some bottlenecks, limitations, and obstacles.
Maybe let's run it out. What context are you asking?
Yeah.
Don't use whatever you want to provide me, right? Apps, utility, right? Like what are some of the things that you're trying to do right now? Like how many transactions per second can you do, things like
What are some certain things that like make you a little nervous when trying to blockchain right now is trying to solve sharding as a result? What's your sharding? You know, like
So sharding is reset number one, ownership is number one, and then talking about how we don't have transaction process.
yeah, I just wrote transaction rate.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi. So it's nice to meet you. Glad you're here. You just like appeared, so I know. Sorry, I probably look at Montreal. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. So I'm working with a team that's trying to communicate this to the mainstream for purposes that relate to a bunch of different things. But are there any resources that you guys might have for our team / any videos or articles that have been written specifically for the mainstream? I have learned so much from just all of this and really excited. But I want to combine all of them. Totally.
Yeah. How much have you how much have you looked into? Have you looked at our Medium articles and?
Yeah. I've been keeping up. I wasn't sure. I just wanted to toss out the.
I'm just trying to get
where
where
we've been following, but not. I feel like I'm at a new level of understanding right now. To that point where I could understand more. If I were to go back and
Absolutely, yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can
Right.
go to another level.
yeah.
Yeah, we do know a lot. Is it possible to compare the DNA with and down?
That was another question. We'll just write that as a question. I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Oh, wonderful. More questions? Anyone have a stupid question they're afraid of asking?
No questions are stupid. I actually unless you don't. Sorry.
So Holochain is basically a network where you create apps to be on.
It's a framework for distributed applications. Yeah, and you create your own app.
And then number two, what are the I guess, checks for, everybody's connected in the network, how do you check for some key or settings that requires basically secure?
So we can talk about verification, validation.
We've got verification, validation up there.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay. Another one or two?
We'll get to yeah. Well, let's go first.
Okay, so the concept of domain names and IP addresses and linking that to Holo, I feel like I don't understand how that connects at all.
Okay. How Holo?
Okay. Yeah. She had a question about it. Yes.
Mary?
A quick overview of what are the skills you would need to be able to make that on Holochain.
Cool. Okay.
Great.
Great question.
Reseeding, how do you prevent it from happening around here?
Cool. Civil attacks, things like that. Cool. Yeah.
Okay. Just want to say that I made a huge mistake and I got this kind of stickies yesterday, not knowing that I did that, and it's just going to bother me all. Civil attacks. Okay, great. Civil attacks, skills needed to build an app, how Holo connects. Let's get another one or two, and then we can get into it.
I'm not sure. This isn't very technical, but I'm curious how you guys got here. Yeah, personal
You want to hear about our personal
I mean,
journeys?
it doesn't have to be super personal, but
We spent the whole time just talking about that.
What did you encounter first that got you to the next thing that got you to meet these people?
Sure, totally.
Where's the trail? Sure. Yeah. It's a very dynamic story for each of us. So
Actually, not a terrible place to start. So people have a little bit of a landing so that they know who we are. Yeah.
Let me just say my question about the data storage of accumulating data stored over and how does that happen?
Like, how does the data get stored, or is this concept growing? Okay.
Like photo boxes and across our iPhones and laptops and it's an ever.
How does it get stored and where?
Like,
Is that right?
ever accumulating data has no space across the
She's also asking about different devices and how different instances work.
That's where I wrote where. Okay, so
Yes.
let's
One more.
do-
We have one more.
Okay.
All right, so basically.
We only have a half an hour, so we're gonna have to be quick.
Holochain's primary Mozilla.
Wait, sorry?
Holochain's primary Mozilla.
Oh.
Mozilla is what's it called? The CTO has been stoked about us publicly, and like they're stoked about us publicly, but that's all we like know. Like nothing's like happened since that, right?
Yeah. We appreciate the enthusiasm when we can find it. So.
Okay, great. So let's take a moment and organize this stuff.
Yeah.
You want to do that while I'm doing this? I think we should. Okay, so set those up down here, and then look for the other ones that we do here. Okay, so I'll start with me. I worked with that guy and his glorious beard for the last 7 years in really radical education stuff with art also, and something called Agile Learning Centers, building these just wholly remarkable, you should talk to him, these wholly remarkable learning centers, right, that can operate as after school groups or summer camps or schools or whatever, that just take learning and education from a first principles perspective and really think about it in terms of like evolutionary biology and anthropology and the current world we live in, and which education models historically have produced the most extraordinary results, and what kind of results are we looking for, like what are the most important things to be evaluating, which boils down to a lot of age-old wisdom about know thyself and be able to know each other and work with each other and tune in. So a lot of that has come from a desire to really support people in who are you, like deep down, and not for me to know, but for you to know. And then what do you need to do what you really want to do, and what is it that you really want to do? And then like what are your challenges and how do you deal with them, right? Because I don't know, my challenges when I was looking at things like that. And then at the next level, and this is where it connects more deeply with Holochain, is to practice that on a collective level. What are our gifts? What are our values? Who are we? How do we operate in the world? And what do we want to do? And what do we need to do to be able to do that? So tapping into intentional culture creation and collective intelligence, and setting up kids to be able to grow up, supporting kids in growing up in an environment where they can actually change the environment they're in, and understand how the environment works at a meta level, so that they can go out in the world and create the world that they want for themselves and together. So that kind of stuff, really cool stuff. And his beard's really good at it. So yeah, I helped build that out for a while, and been really close with Art and Eric, the other the founders, and have followed along with this conceptually. But basically, it builds towards a world that I really fundamentally believe in, and it allows us the technical infrastructure to start tapping into the social infrastructure that we've been working on, and the other side where we can actually connect with each other at a deeper level. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, we all have quite different journeys in Holochain. I think that's what is another part of our organization that makes us quite unique. We really do mean to include everyone, and we want to help people in their own voice within Holochain. So I found that through. I actually came from more of a financial background myself. I worked at JP Morgan Chase for several years, and then I actually migrated into the tech world thereafter. Focused on fintech and a little bit into some blockchain ideas, and then I looked into Holochain as it was recently emerging. Felt very quickly in love with the vision and the idea, because honestly, that had been my original intent. I actually got my degrees in international relations and in French and in business, and with a financial focus. So part of my vision therein was actually to have international business that would connect people for a mutual goal, and I feel like this actually accomplishes that for a very humane level. And then after seeing how technology can accomplish that in a very effective and practical way, I mean, it's the way that we all connect. I mean, through communication, it's the way that we are identifying ourselves through our data, and it's the way that we can protect ourselves and know our identity across, the internet and across the world. And so it really is an important thing to harness, an important thing to protect at this point. So I'm really excited to understand this new tool set that we can use and start to build out and formulate the words together that we can start to have like a workshop rather than just like a tool like that kind of thing. So yeah, so my personal journey has been starting with Holochain. I was actually an intern with Holochain this past summer. And I actually work with the Holo team itself, which is more focused on the networking aspect. So I'm excited to talk about that. But yes, it's been a fast and furious love interaction and very business focused as well. So of course, but it really is one of those companies that will captivate you because it's more than just going to work. It's going to create a future that you believe in. So yeah, cool.
Great. So we want to do Holochain next. Okay. So that was whose question was like Holochain as a network? Or how's Holochain a network? Holochain.
So like how does data store?
You asked that, right? Okay, so who else wants to try answer? So the thing I want to get clear on that is that each app has its own DHT, right? So each app has its own DHT and has its own chain, and each user on that app has their own chain. So for every app, there is its own network, basically. Does that make sense? If you download, so if I download Holochain, right, and if I go to an app store and I download an app, it's gonna be Holochain and this app. Right, so Holochain is the thing that runs the app, and then the app's just going to run on that. And then as I'm participating in this app, I'm participating in this app with everyone else who's running that same app, and that is one network. I could download another app over here, and it would run the same way, and that would be a different network, individual network that I'd be on. Does that answer that question? Cool. Manage access and permission. Do you organize this way?
I from left to right, but yes, I'm sorry.
I spent enough time doing these events in Egypt that I like right to left. So. Okay, go for it.
Yeah, so I just wanted to briefly discuss the skills and ways to kind of approach Holochain and then distinguish between Holo and Holochain and then details. So the skills needed to build an app. One thing I will say is the current version is actually built in Go. With Go, a lot of focus on JavaScript itself, of course. The version that we're currently working on that will soon be coming out is actually going built in Rust. I will specify that Holochain itself is your data store. It's how you organize your data. So it's where you have, of course, your DHT and you have your local chain. So that's decoupled in a way, or loosely coupled. So if you're wanting to create a web app, and once we have, an fuller app ecosystem, any of the front ends you want for more of your native apps, you can choose what application's your preference. You can use vanilla JavaScript, you can use React, you can use Vue. We like to endorse you in the way that you feel most comfortable to build it. That is why we have chosen to do it this way. We like to support more of the modular or granular ways of doing it. So I like to write in React and Redux because I think it aligns with the state's management that Holochain naturally follows. But again, it's not enforced in that way. I will also like to promote TypeScript as well on the front end, just because again, if you can kind of align, because Rust is going to be is a typed language. If you can write in a more TypeScript language like TypeScript React, TypeScript JavaScript, it'll work. But I always like to say for hackathons itself, don't dive in the deep end. Like literally, you just need to understand how the front end connects to the back end, and you can do that in jQuery, you can do that in JavaScript, you can do that in whatever feels most comfortable to you. Don't try and make it this crazy interactive store. All you need to understand is how the data is being parsed and passed between the front and the back end. So for our purposes this weekend, it's not going to be about what front end tool you're using, but just know that you can use what your preference is. Okay.
So on this also skills needed to build an app. There's the languages that you write in as a coder, and then there are other skills that are needed to build an app that are not necessarily coders. We have people that are project managers. We have people that just have a really good idea and are good at like inspiring other people about their idea and stick with it, and then just bring them like tea and coffee as they're coding stuff. And I'm not even being sarcastic. That's like an actual way to help build an app, right?
Data modeling.
Yeah, data modeling, user experience design, all of these things are important for actually creating an app.
Yeah.
But like at the basic level, yeah, you've got someone who can code it. Okay. Manage access. Oh, sorry. Holochain tech.
Tech side kind of goes over it.
Okay.
I know someone did have a question about the mobile focus. So we are focusing on web first, and then kind of working towards mobile. We want to have, of course, like a web interface that's going to be more like a like the Power Web application. So pretty much like the web applications that you can actually open up from your home screen in your phones. We want it to be something that you can start doing that first, and then we'll create a container system that you will actually be matched and able to be used in phones or as a native application on your desktop. But we are working from a mobile first vision. So we are working on different container systems and considering all the different options for wrapping currently, but we haven't decided on one specifically. So right now we're focused on our web.
Whose question is this?
I think that was your question.
Does that answer your question?
Somewhat, because you guys still have questions. Like, you guys still deciding how to architect that, right?
We have a lot of decisions. Not really exciting. It's more choosing which one we want to do.
Well, you good to have an idea of what is the preference so that I can start planning towards it.
I totally understand that.
I'm working on this.
Okay.
I just want to see how I can plug that whatever.
Cool.
In terms of packaging that and distributing that, it's probably going to be more difficult because you have to go to the App Store. To understand.
Definitely agree. We are trying to. I'm going to let Art finish that because that is a very in-depth question.
Great. You'll get that more in depth. So I'm going to put that back open if possible, and then we can say your name again.
It's a very good question. It's something that we're talking a lot about. I just don't want to say anything specific.
Yeah.
Okay. So then I want to get to yours. How does the data get stored and where? Right. So there's a network of people that have hosting boxes, and there's a network of people who have their phones and who are running apps on their phones that can store information for some of those apps. So like, let's say we're running a Twitter type thing and it's only text, right? And 8 people are running that on the phone. Let's say 1,000 people running that just on their phones. The way that the storage on the system works is that you can store like however many, like hundreds of, what was it? Like some number, like a couple hundred of tweets on your phone, or like thousands of tweets on your phone, and it takes thousands of tweets on your phone, and it takes as much space as a picture.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's very, very light. So you could do something like that where it's just stored only on your phone. And then there's a whole bunch of people that have hosting boxes that have many gigs of storage, right? And as this network expands, it's gonna have, there's gonna be like, what will end up happening likely is that data farms, right? These places that have huge, lots and lots of computers with lots and lots of storage are going to start farming out some of that data to these apps, right? So it's basically like it will end up using similar infrastructure, but through a very different protocol.
Is it possible to externalize that storage to like IPFS, so you just starting on static assets and not being like a separate?
Wait, one thing, so we will have hosts, and I have to clarify, we won't have people that will be accessing their data. We will be creating very, like Armor app and very clear distinctions between people who are hosting people's different instances that are being routed through the host. So at no point will someone's data be owned by a different entity or accessible by a different entity. The whole point of having this is actually talking about Holo and more of the networking of what Holo is. So just to back up 1 second. Holo is distinct from Holochain, okay? Holo is going to be your way of interacting with Holochain through more of like your browser, your internet, your typical like interface. So it's a design from the idea of the person who is not necessarily aware of what Holochain is, or maybe you haven't yet installed Holochain on your device, and you still want to have access to this ecosystem. You want to see what it is, you want to participate. So you would open up your browser, and it would just look like a normal interaction like it is today online, and you would have the static assets folder that would be served to you. This would be served through a host. Once you actually log into your application, that is when your instance is going to be started, and that's going to be routed through the host. Now, the host is going to be responsible for helping you enter into your ecosystem or creating or initializing your ecosystem within Holochain. They have to have Holochain on their computer, and they're going to be the router. But because of the way that we're creating it, you won't have, yeah. So the point is, I don't want you to think like, oh, it's just a different, like we're creating our own data farms or we're just like distributing data farms. Like the distinction is like, we're not just distributing it, we're also making sure it's your own. Like it's at no point is going to be someone else. Like,
it's a platform for someone to offer hosting to someone else.
Yeah.
Okay, I have an apartment in New York City, and I'm not using it on any Tuesday night. I go on Airbnb, and then I say this apartment is available for this much money on Tuesday night. And then Manny can go onto a web app, right? Just like on his computer, let's say Manny's a grandpa, right? And he goes on his web app, and he doesn't know any crypto stuff. I make my home available on this Airbnb platform. Let's say we're running Airbnb on Holochain, and then Holo provides the hosting. Like, or actually connects. Like, let's say, actually, we're gonna make it Ben. Ben is using his computer to provide hosting. Oh shit, I'm combining two things that are really similar, so now it's really getting complicated. Anyway, basically, he provides hosting, all right? She connects the app, right, and the hosting to Grandpa. So Grandpa can use it, and whatever the income model for this app is, right? So let's say like the app has an income model, I'm paying some of that income through Holo, and some of that money goes to, or most of that money goes, like some teeny percentage goes to Holo, and most of that money goes to Ben for providing the hosting. So Grandpa can use the app without having to know about any of this.
So you're just the marketplace. And you can
Bam! It's just a marketplace. Airbnb is just a marketplace. It's just a marketplace. You had it up for a while, and then you.
Related to that, I was going to ask, is when you create an app, you trade copies, right? And you set how many copies you want in for verification purposes, right? Do you have control of where those copies go? And secondly, let's say you having the app itself on your phone or on your browser doesn't do this. You have to be connected to the application itself to be part of the network, right?
You have to be connected some way to the network. It could be through a Bluetooth network. It could be through an intranet of a bunch of cables that we're all connected by.
No, but I mean, you have to download the app on top of Holochain.
No. What we're saying is you can access the app directly online without running Holochain if the app is being hosted on Holo.
Now this is still finalizing. Yes.
The goal is for it to be hosted on Holo.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Well, the goal is for both. Holochain's goal, Holo's goal, right, is for it to be hosted on Holo, right? That's how Holo's going to exist. Airbnb wouldn't work if people weren't using the platform. Holochain, they're two different things. Holochain's goal is for distributed apps to take over. Like, that's it, right? And you do not need Holo to run Holochain. To run a Holochain, just if you can run an app on Holochain, and then then you need to run Holochain locally.
Somebody else has Holochain, and then you run the app, they can create it peer-to-peer, right? That's how you create it.
It's still a peer-to-peer network if you're accessing it through the web also. The network's still the same. The data's just not stored locally with you on your Holochain, but it's still stored somewhere else, and that answers the next question that you had around, do you control where it goes out in the network or who stores it? And no, that's part of the security model. You can't control that. If I knew where things were getting stored, then I would be set up to tamper with them. So I can't know that, so then it's randomized.
Another piece is that by using Holochain or using the app, you're basically agreeing that your phone could potentially be used for storage.
Yeah, for certain apps, and you can have an app that says, do you make your phone available for storage? Or do you not make your phone available for storage?
Because at some point, I would just say considering, like, I'm sure like the apps don't run that much memory, but it's kind of like you turn on your phone one day, and suddenly there's like no more memory left because some apps.
So it's up to each app to set those limits, and then for each user to choose what kind of apps. In the same way as like apps could currently like choose to flood your phone with shit, like it would, no one would want those apps, so they would just not be marketable.
Yeah, and I will say we do have a really complex tranching system that we're going to put in place. So it's like almost impossible that a phone would be chosen to serve any like dense assets like that. They wouldn't, because it's not possible, and we don't want to hurt, blow up anyone's phone. That's not fun for anyone. So like we are creating and considering a lot of like highly technical models and putting those in place for that reason. Yes.
But an app developer could still make a shitty app. But then no one would use it, and it would be a shitty app, and that would be bad idea of them to do.
Okay,
so same thing. Hang on. We started off on how does the data get stored and where?
Okay.
Are you clear on that now? Okay, great.
You and then you. Yes.
I think we've got how Holo. Does everyone understand how Holo connects? Like what Holo does? Do you have a question on that?
So Holo isn't a thing that you like go to separately. It's just something that exists in the background and is like routing.
Yes, grandma and grandpa don't have to know about Holo at all. All they have to do is go to a website to use a web app. They can just go to Airbnb or cutekitties.com, right? And on the back end, it's using the hosting is provided by Holo and it's running on Holochain. You don't have to know that at all. That's what's so beautiful about Holo.
Okay, so next question. If there's so like the problem with it, like using up space on your phone, the incentive to allow people to use their storage would be to get paid, but wouldn't be paid through Holo. That would be through if you were doing the Holo chain.
If you were providing hosting on Holo, like through Holo, then you can get paid by providing hosting on the Holo platform, like you provide a house to Airbnb.
That's without the Holochain. That's without hosting Holochain.
You can't be a host for Holo unless you're running Holochain.
Exactly. You're the bridge to Holochain.
I'm running Holochain so a web app can run on Holochain, and because my computer is doing that, I'm charging a little bit for that. Okay, so that's how that relationship works.
So Holo, you don't need Holo to run Holochain because you can download it natively, right, or have it on your own computer. But you do need Holochain to have Holo. Like Holochain needs to exist. Yeah. Someone needs to host Holochain, and that.
But grandma and grandpa don't have to. And then you guys said you had two questions. I think the other one was what about with the app or so if there's an app, right, that is running on Holochain on your phone and on my phone, right? So it is storing some of the information on your phone or some of the information on my phone. Is that what you're saying? Yeah. Right? The app just stores only a little bit. Like WhatsApp stores stuff on your phone, but it's like useful stuff for you. And a bunch of apps store a bunch of stuff that's not useful for us, right? But they just don't do so much of it that it's costly to our phone.
So then there would be no need to provide any more interest that it would be so small.
Sorry,
you wouldn't have to financially reimburse anyone because the storage would be so small, right?
Yeah, and it's not even. It's also just that that would be part of having this app and running this app. It would just be part of how the app works.
Yeah. Yes.
And so the more people that offer hosting, the less storage it will take up in each node or whatever, right?
Right. So ideally, and with the growth of the ecosystem, you'd have more options, and so you'd be more widespread, and so you'd have less.
So there's better scalability.
So yes, and that's one thing I want to say as far as going back to the transactions per minute. We actually don't have transactions per minute. I like to actually kind of reference, and you'll see if you do look at our YouTube videos, you'll see there's a lot of content that each of these topics in detail. But just to kind of reference Nico, who is one of our core app developers, he had given the reference. He's like, no one would talk about how many packages would be sent back and forth on it, through HTTP requests, because there's no one bottleneck. You don't need to talk about that. But yet, because the idea of distributed networking has been really framed through the idea of through blockchain, and that has been the precedent. Everyone considers distributed applications through that one viewpoint, and it does have that. But Holochain, because the way it's structured, we don't have a bottleneck problem. We're not mining, we're not going through these proof of work systems, and so we don't have to really spend the time That is the whole point of how we're restructuring this. We're pushing the validation to the sides. It is integral to what we're doing. Everything that we're pushing extra DHT is validated and has to be verified. But but it's not like every single action that everyone does has to be in tandem and done one in a monolithic decision at a time. And I don't need to hold someone's data if, you know, it's not part of my own action and my own like knowledge sphere. Like why do I need to know if Bear went to Tasmania and decided to buy a car? Like I don't, like, unless I'm like, you know, selling him the car in Tasmania, you know? So there are certain ways of like, you know, distributing and maintaining data. Now, if I wanted to share that header, share it into the DHT, people could gossip and we could have iterations to make sure like some data is, you know, validated and held true, but there is options and it doesn't require every single person to have everyone's data. So yeah,
cool.
Yeah.
Hang on, I want to bring it back. So are we clear on bottlenecks? There is no bottleneck because there is no centralized place that everything has to flow through. Got it? Mm-hmm. Okay, and then I want to keep moving with the juice from the group and like the keep questions. We've only got like 2 minutes left, but I want to also honor the people that had their questions up here earlier, so I'm going to keep us moving here. We've got resources for mainstream, and this was one of the questions that spurred this discussion to begin with, was how do we talk about it with people that aren't developers and this stuff? And the answer is maybe disappointing. We're not actually focusing on providing those right now very much. There's the Medium articles, you can get on the Mattermost, you can follow, you can join the Telegram. There's a bunch of that, but really what we actually need is for this stuff to work, right? So we need developers to build on it. We need app owners, right? And people with great app ideas to be like, oh, this is gonna be good for us. We need businesses and nonprofits and use cases that can say like, oh, we realize we're trying to build stuff on blockchain and oh my goodness, this is so much more effective and useful for us.
I will say one thing, we are definitely creating a lot of resources to support learning of Holochain so that it can enable developers, enable people who want to learn about it so they can create these items and build our ecosystem. So we are coming out with dev camps and we are creating a Holochain manual on GitBooks so you can go through and understand in-depth topics about each thing. And we do have a lot of YouTube videos on
explaining different concepts, but a lot of it's going to just be at a level that's not for the public.
Right.
But it's the same reason we have Holo, is so that people can just get it. Ben's got something.
Hello, Internet. Yeah, I just wanted to say that we should definitely talk. I've just started working at Holo doing communication stuff, and like, yes, the overwhelming majority of what we're doing is about trying to find developers, but I definitely want to make sure there's at least some more content that helps to tell these stories.
We want to communicate this to the general public. Like that's our goal, 50% of it at least. Like, I mean, honestly, the technology behind it is like super. Like when you're trying to explain to people, like sometimes they're like, what? And then as soon as you're like, your data won't be tracked, they're like, what? And as soon as you're like, blockchain doesn't work because of this, they're like, what? Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
Thank
we
you.
want to like help for real, so let's talk.
Perfect. Thank you.
And especially if you want nonprofits on board, like who are not technical people, and that's kind of the field I represent. Like, I need to be able to explain this to my boss.
Yes,
and therefore I need to understand it. So,
That's my that's why we're having this session.
I think this is something that's ultimately going to be experiential for people. And you can explain this to you blue in the face, but once you spend 5 minutes in a decentralized app, it's going to become very clear for people.
Yes.
I'm old enough to remember the dawn of the internet. And when somebody said to me, well, you're going to chat in cyberspace, I said, where is cyberspace? Right? I'm old enough to remember that. And then once I spent 5 minutes in a chat room, it was all clear.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
2 minutes on social media, and I understood publishing or posting to a news feed. Right? That language was familiar to me. News feed was old school.
Yes.
And it's experiential. This is going to be experiential for people. It has to work. That's all I want to say.
Yeah, they have to get their hands and play with it and see how it works.
Exactly.
So I want to also be clear. I'm not saying like no. Okay. I'm not saying no. Still answering your question. I'm not saying no, we don't have those resources, but I'm saying that we don't have like sufficient ones of those right now. Strategic. Yeah.
Got this video.
So okay. So they're going to be starting to come down. That's the resources for mainstream. We've got manage access information. So I don't think we have time to go into. You can just answer this one, right? Transaction rate really quickly.
Well, that was actually what I was saying earlier. We don't really have a transaction. I mean, we do specify actually in some ways to help people compare, but like it really, it's unbounded really. Yeah, it's not really much. That was a long-size model.
Okay. Yeah. So whose question was that? Can you resolve? Okay. And then we've got verification identity.
that was great.
So yeah, so our verification is really is, as you, okay, so I'll start this. When we downloaded the Zome and the zip file, actually, you could see like all the first few functions that came up were all about the CRUD, and then right underneath it had verification. Like when you do this tomorrow, I should say, when you do it on your own time, you'll notice that a good like half of your file that initializes immediately is going to be verification functions that are already built into the system for you. It's because it's so crucial to how our system is built, how Holochain exists, and yeah, the ecosystem that it is. So anytime you are publishing to the DHT, you need to have that what you're publishing verified, and it is going to be yeah, I mean, there's many technicalities, but the reality of it is it's verified, and then it goes back to the origin of what that data is, the author of it, and then once it's considered to be true and valid, then it's put to the DHT. Now, one thing I will say is each author was specific about it being app framework and not just, okay, this is how every app has to exist and be, is that different developers can decide how they want we call each application actually to have membranes. And so we go into really in-depth and align ourselves with some biological terms because it works, honestly, biology works, obviously. So the idea of a membrane being that you can set parameters that would hold the system together. So there's certain things that need to happen in order for this application ecosystem to work. And if you're not going to abide by those, then we need to have an immune system that's going to pinpoint what that's going out and inject that feed. So effectively, though, what happens and what's interesting and very different from blockchain, in my opinion, it's not the fact that different realities can emerge. If someone does post something that actually does not align with what the Holochain or people have seen as actually being valid, then it's not that like, oh, like, you know, our system failed and it's crashed and we don't know what to do. It's okay. Well, at this point, you're going to be ejected, or if it's in line with, if it's decided that's the membrane, and you're effectively going to be forked. You'll have your own little version of what that application was, but you're now going to be the only person in that. And, you know, kind of just completely circumvents the whole reason for that power dynamic in the first place. So it's really trying to pinpoint and understand human and our psychology, and like, you know, not trying to say this is not going to happen or how can we avoid it happening, how can we prevent it, but it's like, no, this happens, and what can we do to de-incentivize this from happening? Mutation. It's a mutation, sure, yeah. So that's a big.
The card game, you're just not welcome to play at the card game.
So someone else wants to accept, you know, your cheating reality, then that's fine. But otherwise, you know, you're not going to have a felt rule over the other people you were trying to.
Yeah, and you can have all the cheaters in one little club together.
Yeah. So yeah.
All right, great. Can you take one deep breath and really slow? You can manage access and permissions at once. Who's managed? Who was this yours? Manage access and permissions.
One sentence. I feel like that'd be hard in one sentence.
Yeah. The answer is yes. You can manage access and permissions.
Yes.
You can make it so that this person can't, or this person can, or you need to do this in order to. Absolutely.
Yeah, you do have your.
Yeah, everyone I know of your use case, yes, absolutely. It has that kind of security.
One thing I will say is that you do have your local chain, and you do have quite like the ADHD. So your local chain, whatever you want to publish there, will stay in there. It's not like it will even go to be a part of the value on the DHT. And there's another setting that's in between that you can actually publish the header only of your local, like what your local chain is. So like say you want an event to happen, say like you want to make it known that like we came to an agreement and this was notarized or something, then you can post that header to the DHT. People can go audit that header and see that, but they're not going to ever be able to view the actual details of the content. You know, if they'll only to know that like you signed it, I signed it. We each have our private keys that are signing that, and the event, the title, whatever is in the header that is necessary for that to be.
Yeah. Did we get art screwed? Yeah.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. It's really. Sure, of course.
And you give them a friendly massage.
Yeah, you gotta really like drag art, and then everyone follows.
Should we say goodbye to the internet, or do you want to?
Yeah, goodbye to the internet. It was so good having you here. We really enjoyed it. Hope you've had as much fun as us, the internet. If you're watching this at home, get yourself a cup of water. You can't be too hydrated, unless you are, and then it's bad. And thank you. Good night.
We have had a bunch of people who've been here the whole time.
Really?
Commenting. Yeah.
Thanks for participating. And you should thank Ben, who allowed you to virtually be here.
One thing I will say is for anybody who wants to watch this later, we are going to try to add transcription to chunks of this anyway. And for Art's talk, we've got the audio that I'll try to cut back together. I can't promise it'll happen like right away, but in particular, leave in the comments anything that you would like to see, you know, in an easier to hear or better cut together way. And I'll add it to the queue of the various videos in our FAQ series that we're trying to produce. So anyway, thanks a lot for watching the video.
Can we turn off this blinding light?
Yes.